Chapter 6: How Pipe Dreams Can Become Realities. There is an oft-repeated phrase with which you must be familiar. It is, "I can dream, can't I?" But this exclamation usually has the tone of futility in it, as though the person making it had no faith that his dreams will come true. Actually, he who dares dream and believe in his dreams is the creator, to a great extent, of his future. You would not be a normal, average human being if you did not have hidden desires and so-called pipe dreams. While you may not confess them to anyone, you do build air castles on occasion, seeing yourself doing something or going somewhere or having something, and you take a certain joy just imagining, for the moment, that these air castles are real. It's seldom, however, that you put the power of your own feeling and conviction behind your dreams. You've never had the faith that they could be converted into actual happenings if you took them seriously instead of fancifully. "Oh, I never expect to do anything like this," a woman said to me once who had been daydreaming about a trip to Europe. "But it's fun to imagine doing it anyway." When I assured her that she could go to Europe if she really wanted to, she laughed and said, "I don't see how. I'd never have money enough to do that." "You certainly won't as long as you continue that negative thinking," I pointed out. "Every other statement you make about yourself is, 'I never expect,' 'I never will have,' and so on. What you are doing is instructing the creative power within not to do anything for you, to keep you from having enough money to do things, and you are getting just what you are picturing." It took her a little while to get onto what she was doing to herself. Then she said, "All right, from now on, I'm going to think positive thoughts. But I still can't see how I'm ever going to get to Europe." "Leave that to your subconscious, to the power within," I advised. "Just picture yourself making the trip to Europe and let the creative power work out the way you are going to get to go, and the means." "It sounds pretty screwy to me," she said, "but I'll try it." "You've got to have faith," I warned. "You just can't go through the motions of picturing yourself in Europe without faith and ever get there." "Okay, I'll give it everything I've got," she said, "and we'll see what happens." "Hold on, you're expressing doubt," said I. "You're not going to see what happens. You're going to see it happen." "I'll never get the hang of this kind of thinking," she laughed. 8 months later, I received a letter from this woman, from Europe, but I didn't recognize her by her name until she identified herself. "I'm here," she reported. "It worked, just as you said it would, only I had to get married to do it." How wonderful, thought I. That something within brought her not only a trip to Europe, but a husband too. When you start picturing good things coming your way, you may get more than you bargained for. Start your mind pumping. Clarence Saunders, now 67, is on his way to his third fortune. Before he was 35, he had his first fortune. His colossal pipe dream of the famous Piggly Wiggly supermarket chain had paid off. Saunders maintains it's easy to think million-dollar ideas once you gear your mind to it. "My mind is pumping all the time," he declares, "and I can never tell what the pump is going to bring up. But I just give the creative power free rein and it comes up with something of value, time after time." Today, Saunders is launching his new chain grocery idea, which he calls the Food Electric. The store operates so automatically that the customer can collect her groceries herself, wrap them, and act as her own cashier. It eliminates the checkout crush, cuts overhead expenses, and enables a small staff to handle a tremendous volume, says Saunders. I can handle a 2 million volume a year with only 8 employees, whereas any other supermarket of the same size would employ at least 40, perhaps 65 people. I've made and lost millions in my life, but I'm on my way to my next million now. How can you stop a man like that? Is your mind functioning on all cylinders at 67? Or will it be? It won't, unless you've trained it to operate. You are carrying a potential fortune around in your head at all times. Start your mind pumping, Saunders suggests, and you may strike oil. Pipe dreams, you say? Nothing like this could ever happen to me. Watch that negative thinking. You can't conceive of the possibilities within you once you give the creative power within an opportunity to be of service. Did the Wright brothers have a pipe dream when they pictured themselves building and flying their first aeroplane? Many unseeing people thought so and heaped ridicule upon them, but this didn't stop the Wrights. They had the courage and the faith to keep on dreaming and working in the face of skepticism and brought a new mode of travel to the world. So few of us have vision. We cannot see beyond the present moment. We become so immersed in our current difficulties and problems that we can visualize no way out. Pipe dreaming is a way of escape into the future, a way of freeing yourself from the present and creating new opportunities and developments. I don't mean that you can sidestep present responsibilities and problems, but the cure for many of them lies in your future, as does your hope for self-betterment. Look forward, never backward, has been the admonition of wise men. They have known that the past can do nothing for you, but the future always holds promise if, in the words of Peter Ibbotson, you dream true. How great is your faith? How long could you persist in a dream, something you very much wanted, if it took some years to come true? Would your faith waver? Would your enthusiasm die out? Would you decide that the apparent obstacles were too many, that they could never be overcome? Would you compromise with yourself and settle for something less than you had originally visualized? Ask yourself these questions as I let Zora Adler of Glendale, California, tell of her pipe dream, which she carried in mind and heart for 22 years, and which she and her husband, Dan, have just brought to fruition. It is one of the most remarkable and inspiring demonstrations of visualization and faith and never give up spirit and harmony and cooperation and the perfect working of the power within that has ever come to my attention. Here is Mrs. Adler's thrilling story in her own words. I suppose my dream really started 22 years ago when I would look up at the hills above our home in Glendale and would say to Dan, my husband, "Someday, let's build a house up there." We did build one 9 years later, halfway between there and my real objective, but I still had my heart set on the heights. Someday we would have our home where I originally had seen it. And because I noticed that most people walk worriedly and look at the ground, I decided that the answer to that was to take my 2 little girls for hikes into the hills, where there were trees and clouds to make them look up. Somehow, there is so much to see when the chin and the eyes are lifted. It was on such a hike into the hills that I walked out onto a plateau, overlooking the whole San Fernando Valley, on into Los Angeles, Long Beach, and even Santa Monica Palisades, and I felt an immediate attachment for the location. Impulsively, ecstatically, I said to the girls, "Let's build a house here." They were very excited, for, little as they were, they loved it too. But imagine my saying a thing like that, getting such an idea when we had just completed a new home scarcely 3 years before. Well, we hurried home fast, almost afraid the place might be gone before we could come back with their daddy to show him this new location for a home. I didn't stop to think that he might be upset by such a show of interest in another building site, and wonder if his wife was the sort of woman who would just never be satisfied. But instead, to my surprise and delight, he went right back with us, and as soon as he saw the hilltop and the view, he said, "Find out who owns it." That was 13 years ago. The next morning, I went to the City Hall in Glendale and found it was owned by a Mr. and Mrs. Jennings who lived in San Diego. I wrote the usual letter of inquiry and sent it on its way, holding the thought that the lot was for sale and that we could have it. Somehow, from the very beginning, I never doubted that the lot would be ours. I was not at all surprised then when Mr. Jennings wrote back and told us we could buy it, but the miracle was yet to come. The price was over our heads, since we were buying our present home and business, and with prospects of more children, we felt we should not take the big step. But every Sunday afternoon, we would walk up to our lot and draw house plans in the dirt. On such a Sunday, I was literally dancing around with the girls and my husband, for I had hit on a perfect plan for the house and could just see it standing there, all finished. An elderly couple had come up on the hill while we were there, and I noticed they had been eyeing us. After a while, they sauntered over to where we were preoccupied with our blueprint in the dirt, and this was our conversation. The elderly gentleman: "I see you are drawing house plans." Mrs. Adler: "Oh yes, we are going to build a house here." He replied: "Are you interested in this lot?" And she replied: "Yes, indeed. This is our lot, a new home site." He laughed: "This is very interesting, for I am Mr. Jennings. Mrs. Jennings and I own this property." A bit taken aback, Mrs. Adler replied: "Well, Mr. Jennings, it is very nice to meet you, but I am not going to take back a single word of it. We won't be building right away, but I feel I should let you know that this is exactly what we are going to do. Since there are 3 other lots, won't you be our neighbors?" Mr. Jennings smiled and replied that they would be delighted and would build on the front lot about 50 feet below ours. Over the span of the next 11 years, Mr. Jennings wrote us 3 times, each time saying he was going to sell the lots, and if we were still interested, to let him know right away. I always answered that we were interested, but we'd have to wait. The time was not ripe for us, but I did finally tell him to go right ahead and put the property on the market. I stated, however, that I thought it was only fair to warn him so he wouldn't be wasting his time, but the Adlers are the ones who will build on it, even if he should sell it, so it probably would be a useless bit of buying and selling to let it go to someone else meanwhile. We laughed about it, but he didn't really suspect how seriously I meant it. Almost 11 years passed by, and then I contacted Mr. Jennings again, saying we were now ready to buy the lot. He came to Glendale immediately, and we signed the papers. What a glorious feeling it was, and such a fulfillment! As we rose to leave the office, Mr. Jennings took my hand and said, "Mrs. Adler, I think you put the jinx on me." "Oh no, Mr. Jennings, I wouldn't do that to anyone." "Well, for your information, I think you should know that 3 separate times we sat at a desk just like this to sell that lot to someone else, and something happened and the deals fell through. You jinxed me all right. All the other lots sold, and this, the best one of all, had apparently been reserved for you." I could have told him that I had placed it all in God's hands some 13, if not 22 years before, and had known that our dream house was already a reality then. You must have unwavering faith. But the end is not yet. After gaining actual ownership at last, we contacted a building contractor. He looked at our plans and told us that unless we had $36,000 in our pocket, we could not possibly build that house. I laughed and asked him if he had ever known anyone with that much money. He replied that the thing wrong with people like us was that we had big ideas, that we should go to an architect and tell him how much money we had, and then let him build a house accordingly. We told him that was not the house we wanted, and left. You see, I drew all the plans too, and I wasn't settling for anything less than what had been visualized. Anyway, a bit dampened in spirit, I turned to my darling husband, who said, "Where's your faith? We'll build that house. There are other contractors. He just isn't the one to build it for us. Let's go and see Mr. Brown. He has a lot of information on these things." We did, and Mr. Brown directed us to a possible solution. It all led to a contractor who had the exact setup we needed. Our house is exactly as we planned it, every door and every nail, and it cost us thousands less than 36,000. All things are surely possible in God. Now that our dream house is practically finished and we are ready to move in, everyone who comes onto the property and sees the home, which has had God as a co-builder, remarks that there is something very different about the feeling of the place. It is not just another house and lot. The craftsmen have all been most congenial and happy. There is an atmosphere of peace and contentment and harmony everywhere. It is interesting to note, too, that buying at the time we did was much the best. It was well worth waiting for, because had we purchased the property previously, we would not have been protected on the utilities as we were later. We even got a sewer. And I might add, our lot was several, in fact $3,000 less than the next selling price on the lot. And you know, after seeing it, how much more desirable our hilltop location is than any of the surrounding locations. We would be a pretty difficult family to convince that the best partner anyone could have is not God and the God power within. What do you think of pipe dreams now? Like the O'Briens, the Adlers attained their dream home. It took them years longer. They didn't find it ready-made. They found the location first, then created the house in their minds and drew blueprints of it, and held to the thought that they would be able to buy the site they wanted and get the money one day to build this home. It required unwavering faith and persistence, never losing sight of their goal, never permitting themselves to be disturbed or to change their original pictures and desires, sticking to what they wanted no matter what happened. Was it worth it? You bet it was. And you'll say the same when you set your goal in life, whatever it is, and call upon this creative power within to serve you, as it has served and is serving the O'Briens and the Adlers of this world. This power never fails you if you don't fail it. The Adlers have brought up their daughters to think as they think, to picture happiness and success and good health for themselves, to be free of fear and worry thoughts, to add the power of their own visualization to the mental picturings of the parents. There is tremendous power generated in a family circle when all are in harmony. Where two or more are gathered together, things happen. Breathe the breath of life into your pipe dreams by believing in them, by maintaining your faith and your dreams unfalteringly, come what may. And eventually, if you persevere, what once was a dream will become a glorious reality.